Coming up.
Do you think that processing a permit every 45 seconds when we're dealing with people potentially coming from countries that are high risk is adequate time to vet people? As I have here, the terrorist screening data set encounters data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and it showed that in 2023 there was 484 matches on the U.S. terrorist watch list at land ports of entry along the Canada-U.S. border. And so far in fiscal year 2024, there's been 321 of these encounters. Since 2017, these numbers have gone up 123%.
Like and subscribe.
So we're engaged in a study of the review of the foiled terrorist plot in Toronto and of the security screening process for permanent residence and citizenship applications. So pursuant to Standing Order 108 Sub 2 and the motion adopted on August 13th, the committee is resuming this study. And I want to remind members that there is currently a Section 517 publication ban in place. A Section 517 publication ban prohibits the publication of any information, evidence, or representations made at or in anticipation of a bail hearing. Any bail conditions, reasons of the bail court, and any evidence or materials relied upon at the bail hearing are prohibited from disclosure. We will start our questions at this point with Mr. Lloyd. Please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony, Commissioner. I agree, we need to support our hardworking civil servants who are on the front lines. But importantly, we also need government to implement policy to give those hardworking civil servants the tools to protect Canadians. In a chronology given to us on the entry of the alleged terrorist Ahmed El-Didi, who was allowed into the country in 2018 on a temporary resident visa, and later that year he submitted an asylum claim, which was ultimately granted. You were the Minister of Public Safety at the time, is that correct?
In 2018, yes, I was.
Thank you. Now, in 2018, the same year that El-Didi entered the country, and a year before he was granted asylum status, your government stopped requiring police clearance certificates from certain countries of origin. Now, when this change was introduced, when you were minister, did you have decision-making power over that decision, and did you have any concerns about the decision to not require police clearance certificates from certain countries of origin?
Mr. Chairman, I heard this point being made in a previous meeting of the committee, and I have not been able, at long distance that I am, to be able to verify the facts of what exactly is being alleged here. It is something about which I have no direct knowledge because I was Minister of Public Safety, not Minister of Immigration. There's a difference in our ministerial.
Thank you. Surely, Minister, as the Minister of Public Safety, you know, I understand how ministries work. I understand that Public Safety and Citizenship and Immigration Canada work very closely together. And if a policy decision was made under your government when you were Minister of Public Safety to stop requiring police clearance certificates from countries where there is a very high risk, was this not concerning to you at all?
One of the focuses that we had in that particular year, as I recall it, was making the use of biometrics universal across the system. That would be within the purview of the public safety portfolio, whereas a decision about the other matter would not. But in fact, Mr. Chairman, when you look at the basic approach to security screening as it existed in 2018, as it exists now, as I understand it, and as it existed before our government came to office in 2015, the basic approach, the fundamentals of that system are the same now as they were then, and there has been no diminution in the quality of the investigations.
To suggest, Minister, that removing police clearance certificates is a pretty serious policy change. But I'll move on to my next question. Last year there was over 680. Sorry, thank you. Last year there was over 682,000 study permits approved by this government. That works out to be a permit approved every 45 seconds. Now I understand you weren't the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, but in your experience as a minister, do you think that processing a permit every 45 seconds when we're dealing with people potentially coming from countries that are high risk is adequate time to vet people.
The experience that I've had with the people who do this work, at least the part of it that falls under public safety and CSIS and CBSA and the RCMP and so forth, is that they are very skillful. They do their work extremely conscientiously. And if they err on the side of being cautious. They take the responsibility of public safety with the gravitas that it deserves. I found that to be the case under the previous government prior to 2015. And I found that to be the case of the same officials doing the same job in the same way when I was their minister. I think both
and I agree,
before and after 2015 take it very seriously.
And
Politics has nothing to do with this.
I agree with you, High Commissioner, that hardworking civil servants are certainly trying their best, but when they're having essential tools taken away from them, like having security clearances put from countries of origin, we're really taking away tools from them. And in this case, I believe it was a potential tool that could have been used to prevent an alleged terrorist from coming to this country in the first place. However, your former colleague and the current Minister of Public Safety said that in this case, that the system worked as it was supposed to. But the fact is that our immigration system let in an alleged terrorist and ignored at least 4 risk factor flags, and then later gave him citizenship and gave student visas to 2 other alleged terrorists. Do you believe that this is truly how the system is supposed to work?
Mr. Chairman, I think the ministers have said very clearly that the very reason why they're conducting the review that they are conducting at the present time is to find out if in this case, or more broadly systemically, but specifically in this case, are there gaps that need to be filled. Judging by what appears in the public media to this point about these particular cases, and we're all operating under an information limitation of what can be put in the public domain and what cannot. But judging by what's in the public media to this point, no one had any information about a terrorist connection to these individuals until about June of this year. None of our agencies had prior access to any such information, and neither did the Americans or the British or anybody in the Five Eyes or any of our other allies also. When the connection was identified in about June of this year, it was immediately imparted and acted upon, and the public was protected and the suspects were arrested. Can all of that process in the circumstances of this case be improved upon? That is what the ministers are conducting their review to find out.
Thank you. Sorry, too much technology here. We go now to Mr. Gahir, please. 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, High Commissioner, for appearing before the committee. Just for the sake of the folks that are watching online, Mr. Lloyd just made a point that there's a student permit that's approved every single 45 seconds. There's no way that you can approve a visitor visa or a student permit in 45 seconds. It takes months and months and possibly years, as my constituents know, to get a student permit approved. There's a security check, an eligibility check, finances, amongst other things that are checked. So no, it does not take 45 seconds within which you can approve a student permit. Now moving on to the actual meeting today. High Commissioner, when you were the Minister of Public Safety, were you ever briefed on Ahmed Fuad Mustafa Al-Didi?
No.
No. So can you reasonably conclude that you weren't briefed on Al-Didi because Canada, like our Five Eyes partners and like-minded allies, were not in possession at the time of any intelligence linking Al-Didi to ISIS?
No, that's correct, and CSIS and other agencies have testified to that. fact that the information first became available to Canadian authorities in about June of this year.
Like we know that in some countries there are police forces which are carrying out the mandate of what could be an oppressive regime. They have varying levels of respect for human rights, and sometimes they just may not have the capacity that we're used to dealing with here in Canada. So could you talk a little bit about that, about some of the challenges that might exist with police certificates from other countries?
Well, you make a good point. The relationship between Canada and the UK is really quite extraordinary. And when our police forces exchange information, we can be absolutely confident that we each on both sides can rely on that information, and that it will have been collected with the proper respect for due process and the rule of law and all of the other principles that are fundamental to the way our societies work. In other parts of the world, some of the systems are not nearly as reliable. So when we receive that kind of information from those other parts of the world that may not share our values, may not share our system of governance or our legal principles, the agencies will obviously look at the information, and it will be part of their decision-making process. But they will also weigh what is there in terms of its credibility. They are making a decision not on behalf of that other country, but they're making a decision on behalf of Canada and Canadians. And accordingly, they have to bring Canadian principles, Canadian standards to bear on the probative value of the information. Any investigator always has those kinds of decisions to make. Some evidence is more compelling than others. Some information is more reliable than others, and you have to make sure you're making a good, credible judgment about how much weight to put on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my first comment is on these police certificates. I find it interesting that they are no longer required for temporary residents, and yet we're still using them for permanent resident applications. Wouldn't you agree, High Commissioner, that our hardworking civil servants have the training and intelligence to be able to discern between a quality police certificate report that comes from a country that is credible and a police certificate report that comes from one that isn't credible?
Mr. Chair, when the officials from IRCC were before the committee, I believe that they went into quite an explanation about how they determine what is appropriate for a reference for further security investigation and what is not, depending on the circumstances of each individual case. I mean, they are the
to reiterate my question, Minister, wouldn't you suggest that it's always generally better to have more information than less information and trust our officials to make the right call?
Within the bounds of what is reasonable, Mr. Chairman, obviously it's helpful to have more information if it is relevant and if you can get it.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Now, my next question is, I have here the terrorist screening data set encounters data from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and it showed that in 2023 there was 484 matches on the U.S. terrorist watch list at land ports of entry along the Canada-U.S. border. And so far in fiscal year 2024, there's been 321 of these encounters. Since 2017, these numbers have gone up 123%. I think you'd agree, High Commissioner, that next to Great Britain, that our relationship with the United States is a privileged one and one of our most important relationships. Are you at all concerned with this skyrocketing number of terrorist encounters that the U.S. government is reporting, that we're at any risk and that the U.S. government is taking this seriously?
What I do know from my experience in the portfolio is that The relationship between the American agencies and the Canadian agencies is very close. It's very tight. We, in fact, enacted legislation to facilitate the movement of information back and forth across the border. It's important to them. It's important to us. We have to make sure that the quality of the information in all of the watch lists is as high and as comprehensive and as accurate as it can be, and that's a constant challenge. But the working relationship between Canada and the U.S. in protecting that amazing border between our two countries, which is one of our greatest assets both ways, is a
one of our greatest assets as a country.
At it every day.
It is one of our greatest assets as a country. It is huge, but seeing that it's increased by 123% since 2017, 484 last year, are you at all concerned that this skyrocketing number, if not stopped, could potentially jeopardize this relationship? Are you concerned?
I have every confidence that the Canadian authorities are very well respected and credible in the eyes of their American counterparts, and vice versa.